Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new panel. I hope you enjoyed the talks until now. We had some amazing talks. We had Bryce, who just finished her presentation on bans, how and why. It was very instructive, and it kind of ties into what we're going to talk about now, because it's like the finding a place in the community panel, like everything we've talked about today, really. It's all about well-being of everyone in the Smash scene. And sometimes well-being is just really hard to achieve, whether you're a tournament organizer, a TO, whether you're a player, whether you're a community organizer. It can get really exhausting to be involved in the scene, and sometimes you need a break, or you just need to go away, or you need some better structures in place to protect you. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's presentation, on Burnout in a Volunteer World. So I have three amazing speakers with me, and I will let them introduce themselves. So Dr. Piggy, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Great, thank you. I'm Kyle Noya, aka Dr. Piggy. I am currently I just finished my PhD doing research in SMASH, specifically in gender and emotion regulation. But more people know me for the work I've done in the community, which has included commentary and mainly I directed the Smash COC for a few years. So that's what I'll be talking about today for the most part.
Yep. So for those of you who aren't comfortable with the Smash scene yet, COC is Code of Conduct panel. We will be talking about it in more detail, but yeah, so COC, Code of Conduct. Teroz is our second speaker. Teroz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Casper, also known as Teroz. I've been organizing tournaments and doing different kinds of community work for a few years now. And earlier this year, I got burnt out, and I've been away from the community for about 7 months now, which is why I'm here today to speak about that part of my experience. And I'm currently studying event coordination.
So it's always weird to get you all on stream because I'm like, you got burned out. Do you want to talk about it? Here's some work. Thank you, Teroz. And finally, we have an amazing speaker, Usleon. You have been in the scene for such a long time, and you left a while ago, so many people might not know you. So do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks. So, my name is Dusan, go by Usleon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm actually and originally from Chile. I started playing Smash there, did a little student exchange in Finland. So my first contact with the European community was there, and then moved to Germany about 11 years ago. So it's been a while, and I started off as a player, and I noticed very quickly that like there weren't that many events back then. So I decided to start hosting events, and that way I kind of fell into this duality between being like a player. I was I was ranked for a couple of years. I would not consider myself to have been a great player, but I mean, you could say whatever you want. And hosting tournaments quite a lot in the period between 2014 and 17 in Berlin, Germany specifically. And then at some point I decided it was a bit too much. I needed something new and quit in 2018. Been away ever since.
So it's amazing to have you all three. We all have some shared experiences clearly in the scene. I think one thing that we have that you had definitely in common is that the three of you have been a unique point of contact in your communities for what you are doing. So Dr. Piggy, you were the founder and you are the main person that we associated with the Code of Conduct panel. Teroz, you were a huge TO, but we associated with Phoenix Blue more than anyone on your team really, or with seeding in Europe, because you were responsible for the seeding of pretty much every tournament in Europe for 3 years. Usleon, you have been carrying for several years the Berlin scene on your back. So basically, this is my first question, and Teroz, would you like to answer first? Really, it seems that it ends up that one individual often takes responsibility for a lot of work and for the entire well-being of one community or one part of the community. Do you think there are specific reasons for this and ways to avoid this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like starting off, just the community as a whole, we need a lot of people. We have a lot of different things that need doing. You know, we need people to host our tournaments. We need people to handle the well-being of our community members. We need people to do seeding for tournaments and so many other things that we need people for. And to be honest, we just don't have enough people for it. So that's why those of us who want to put our effort into doing one of these things feel like, oh, it's my responsibility to do all of it, kind of. Like as a tournament organizer, I started out just wanting to do one thing. I just wanted to organize tournaments, and then when you have, like for example, I'm sure Piggy will talk more about this, but when there are, those are the kinds of cases that the code of conduct panel handles. For a lot of communities, that just falls upon the TOs to handle, and I think a lot of us just feel that responsibility quite a lot. So I think that's one of the main reasons. It's just that we don't have enough people, and so those of us who are already invested just feel like we need to invest even more.
Usleon, do you feel like this is also what you went through when you became a TO?
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of those things. Before I go any further, because you mentioned I was carrying the Berlin scene on my back,
I believe there
I
were
just
two
want to
Berlin.
say that, yeah, that's I think that's what most people thought, and I think that also kind of ties into um, another kind of feeling of burnout. I guess like a lot of people, you don't get a lot out of doing this besides feeling good. Like you did something good, and if you get a couple of thank yous, that's enough in the beginning. But there are a lot of people that are not even recognized, so that people don't know that they are as important. So at this spot, I want to name, because most people seem to know me for Berlin, but like my biggest support and pillars back then were Luma, D-Rage, and Konati, now known as Kobobi, who still carries and he's hosting weekly. So he was a little Padawan back then, and just want to like give him a little shout out to make sure they get some recognition. Because if you keep doing stuff and nobody notices, nobody, I don't know, like, it's hard. How are more people going to get interested or want to get involved if you're just constantly being overlooked? So
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. But
That's an excellent point, yeah.
yeah, and I know like there's probably a lot of people out there that don't even get a shout out of that don't know like players or other members of the scene don't know they are important as well. It's just we're not one man or women teams. We are usually a group of people that work like finely geared machines and like, gears. So it's not impossible to do alone. Otherwise, like no, I would not recommend that. I started off like that. Noticed very quickly that doing everything on my own is a terrible idea. So yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. Well, in that sense, Dr. Piggy, you've been training people to join the Code of Conduct panel, and you had volunteers to train and to prepare to share the responsibilities. You want to talk a little bit about this and more generally about experience sharing solutions of some kind that would allow to share responsibility and recognition, as Usleon very rightly pointed out.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just trying to think of the best way to say. So it always takes energy to train somebody. And whenever you train somebody on any task, whether it's running the stream or seating or whatever, there's also a learning curve for them, right? So there's a certain amount of time where they're not going to be, you're going to need to like check over their work or like be available for questions, that sort of thing. And so even when you try to create a structure where you pass on your knowledge, there's a learning curve. And so somebody's got to be there to do those things, whether providing the training or answering questions. And that's a role in and of itself, right? And I wish we had more resources like, I don't know, like Smash GG has a GG University where you can go and learn some of the basics about TOing. But other than that, it's hard to, like, how do you become a national level streamer? Well, a lot of times you had to have worked with other national level streamers. Like, there's like this lack of a system to how we pass on knowledge right now. So the interesting thing about the Code of Conduct panel was that because it was this international effort, there was a lot of attention brought to it. And there were a lot of people that said, hey, I want to help. Let me step up and do something to make it better. But even coordinating interviews, you know, I can't do 20 hours of interviews in a week on top of writing my dissertation and all that, right? And then after doing the interviews, getting people into the Slack or whatever organizing, you're going to lose some people there. And then once you actually get to the training, who actually did the training? And by the end of it, if I had 20 applicants, I'm going to have maybe 6 or 7 panelists that actually show up for their first case. And that's a lot of effort, right? And of course, thank you. I love the panelists that did show up, like the 6 or 7, like you,
Yeah.
you're there volunteering, but I think a lot of the work is invisible, as we've all been discussing. The things people don't think about, you know, how does a stream overlay come to exist? How does someone switch between cameras? How does somebody get onto a panel? How does somebody overseen so that we make sure they're doing good work? All of those things are just hard to appreciate from a player's perspective, but very familiar to all of us who have tried organizing.
Very good points here. So yeah, we've got this whole training pipeline, which is hard to get. Everyone's a volunteer, everyone lacks recognition, so it's hard to keep people in the pipeline, even if you put a pipeline into place, which is not often the case to begin with. I feel personally like there's also a lot of community expectations. So if you start doing something, they don't, yeah, you're all nodding. If you start doing something, you can't ever stop because people will assume that you're going to do it forever. Is this something that you met, Usleon, while you were both queuing and playing?
Yeah, actually, that was gonna be like straight my next point. Like, how do you manage expectations from the community? You start doing something, and at some point, they expect you to keep doing them in a certain way. They expect you to either not stop, to always keep rising the bar, to always do better. And if we tie this back to what Dr. Piggy was talking about, so this curve, yeah, the learning curve,
Yeah.
learning curve. Like, how do you get new people to commit when they start noticing, oh, this is actually a lot more time than I thought it would be, and then I will have all eyes on me, and what if maybe like people will start, you know, questioning themselves whether they'll be able to either do a good job or TOing or like creating any sort of community, well, asset or space. And that's also a thing that maybe scares people away. They're just not ready to commit that far, not because they don't have the time, but also that it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you disappear or you're not, I do remember back then players asking me in a jokingly way, so when's the next tournament? And you're like, yeah, I'm working on it. Or like people asking you, so when are you like gonna like show up at one of my tournaments again? It's like, well, I need to think about it a little bit. But this whole thing or point around managing expectations is it's hard, and I think people. I like the way sort of the community is going after they quit. I think that more recognition is being gotten by different players, but also that people that are a bit more understanding in that sense that maybe back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
and that will tell you that if you need some time for yourself, if you need to skip a tournament or skip a year or whatever, then do it. And I don't think that was something that when I was still TOing, at least, it was more of a thing. I kept being asked for years when I was going to host Helix 2, and there was a lot of pressure that comes with Helix. For those of you that don't know, was the German qualifier for the 2015 European Smash circuit. So it's been a while. Back then, it was the biggest tournament in Germany. The project kind of just landed onto me, like it wasn't expecting or wanting to do that. But people kept asking, when are you going to do this? And or like this the second iteration. And for me, it was a question of, is this really worth all my time, all my effort? And financially, it's a risk as well. And people are not willing to accept the fear that a TO might have. So what if I go into minus? That you don't know if you're gonna get that money back. You don't want to get personally in that bad spot. So I like the way things are going. So to keep it short, people are a bit more understanding, but managing expectations from the community is something that's not always easy, and it makes it hard for new people to step into the role and start doing things.
Teroz, do you want to explain the big sigh on the financial responsibility?
Well, just, bad memories coming back.
Yeah.
But and that's another thing, when just having the expectation of putting on these great tournaments and also just making them greater and greater and bigger and bigger, and I feel like we're almost putting ourselves in a position where we take bigger financial risks because we want to make the next event even better and we want to one up ourselves. and a lot of that comes from the expectations from people. But I feel for myself, it's also the expectation I put on myself. I think the expectations are two-sided. It's both the actual expectations of the community, but it's also, I feel, for a lot of TOs, we just put a lot of pressure on ourselves, a lot of expectation on ourselves, because we feel that we need to do this. I mean, that's been what I've been telling myself for a long while now. I have to do this for the community. It's my responsibility to do this for the community. And somewhere along the way, I've kind of forgot why. Why is it my responsibility? I don't even know at this point. I just somehow know that this is my responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Piggy, do you relate to that?
Oh, yes, of course. I think something that is interesting is that when you really care about something, it becomes harder and harder to distinguish what is my responsibility versus what is my what am I doing voluntarily, right? So for me, I was a victim of sexual assault throughout my life, and so when it came to the code of conduct panel trying to make decisions and like get bans for people who perpetrate that kind of behavior, it was this really I was so passionate. I'm like, I want to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. And suddenly I'm taking on a little bit more or doing this one more thing, and because like it was so important morally, emotionally, and experientially, right? The line blurs between, okay, well, this is my money that I'm about to put into the tournament. Like this is the money that I might use to pay rent or buy groceries. But you know what? My money is actually the community's money, right? I also took I think I was like $700 in the hole at some point, paying for training and stuff like that with the code of conduct. And it's really hard. One thing that I think we lack as a grassroots scene is there wasn't anybody above me more experienced telling me, hey, whoa, $700 is too much to put forward into the community. You have no idea if you're getting that back or how, right? I didn't have anyone telling me to put on the brakes or think a little bit harder. Luckily, I do have some people who love me, like my sister and my spouse, who noticed at least with the emotional part, like, hey, you are crying in the shower a lot. Maybe this is too much. So it's really challenging to know when you believe in something, when Smash was something that took you out of a dark place, or some full of your friends, or like these experiences like shaped your adolescence, or whatever it is. We all had a reason we wanted to start organizing. Without much guidance, it's really easy to lose yourself in that. And I think that's sort of what this panel is all about.
It is.
Is whether or not, or how we ended up deciding we needed to draw boundaries around our time or energy or money or whatever else.
Yeah, and I think so. Earlier today, we had some LGBT plus players who were talking about the network of supports that they've relied on, that they've needed to rely on to find their place in the community and have a better time in the community. And I think as organizers, it's not necessarily the kind of things that we have in the same way. Obviously, it's not a matter of being marginalized, but it's still a need for support networks that we don't necessarily have at all. So, Dr. Piggy, you've mentioned your spouse and your sister. Teroz, Usleon, do you have people who have helped you realize that you are going over the edge, or did you have to realize it on your own?
Well, I'd say for myself, I've had a lot of people tell me, even people in the community have, at many points throughout my years in the community, have warned me that, okay, you're working too hard, or are you doing okay? You seem stressed out. I've heard that one a lot, but it's kind of, it goes in through one ear out through the next, like, oh no, I mean, it's fine, or haha, yeah, I'm dying. But it's never been enough to make me properly stop and take a step back. It wasn't that, I mean, that, and that's part of why I got burnt out. It's because I never stopped. I but I feel like in a way that's what had to happen. I had to experience this. Like my body had to experience this, and see firsthand what actually happens, because it wasn't real in a way. And and also, if you say that you have a big tournament that you're preparing for, you're working, you're sleeping 4 hours a night for a month, and you're working. I've been there, and then I get out on the other side feeling fine. That somehow, that tells your brain that, okay, I can do this without getting burnt out. Sure, I needed to take a few weeks off to recuperate, but even at my most stressed out point, I didn't break. That means I can do anything. That's basically what my brain thought. But so, in a way, I feel like I'm glad that it happened, because now I actually know for myself what can happen and what will happen. Because it just didn't click when people told me, or even when I felt at my lowest points. I never thought that I could go get to the point where I would need such an extended break.
What about you, Usleon?
There's for me there's different parallels to that, because I quit the scene in steps. So from completely disappearing to not stop TOing and stop playing. And I think some friends started noticing, said, yeah, you don't. I think the first sort of sign was you don't seem to enjoy this as much as you did before, but you keep pushing yourself to do it. And that's when like we were talking, like Teroz was saying before, there's a sense of commitment to like just not stop, and then you kind of just put one foot across the line, and then it's already too late. I think for me as a player was realizing I kind of stopped caring, but it still felt like, oh, like I'm a ranked player. Like I need to go to tournaments. I need to perform well. Then you're not completely into it. You still want to do fine, but then there are a lot of other factors like having less time, getting older, and like your hands cannot. They just cannot play as long as they like when I was 16 or 17. And all these new kids have all these super optimized tools to get good super fast. They're all super clever, and then you feel like, oh, I'm suddenly getting beat by a lot of people. Why do I keep doing this? It's kind of like a vicious circle in which you feel you should be performing more. Should I be putting more time into this, or should I just call it quits? I think that for me, that started in 2017. It took me over a year to realize, no, I'm done with this, and I need to just go away. Which is why I think I could make a pretty clear cut. So when Air 5, I said I'm quitting and I'm not going to go anywhere as a player afterwards. I think I've only attended a couple of locals, but that was definitely it. For TOing, I think same. My friends were saying, "Oh, you don't seem to enjoy this as much. So why do you keep doing this?" So yeah, like I feel like I have to do it, but I started getting angry at tournaments. I started getting angry at people's like, how can they be so unconsiderate, or how can they be so I don't know. Like I think my expectations from my tennis were a bit too high, and I noticed this is not doing me well. Like I don't go home after a tournament organized feeling, oh, I did such a good job, or like people were happy. Like more often than not, these angry moments were more present than the good moments. So that's when I said I can't do this anymore. Like it doesn't do me any good. And that's when I said, yeah, it's enough.
Yeah.
And that kind of just naturally meant that I just step away from the community. Everything was changing. At some point, you don't feel like you belong that much to the community because your interests have changed. Everything has changed, and you feel like it's a time for other people to take over.
Yeah.
But I think in my case, it was mostly like me noticing through little things and just friends pointing out also small things. But yeah, so I guess that's all I have to say to it.
And would you say, like, if tomorrow you were to see someone, so I'm going to ask this question to all three of you. I could start with you, Dr. Piggy. You haven't talked to in a while. If tomorrow you saw someone who is doing the exact same thing that you were doing a year ago, and that you're starting to see them burn out, and you're obviously seeing them because it happened to you, right? And you know how it begins. Is there anything you'd want to say to them, or do you think, as Teroz and Usleon said, like you have to be there and hit a wall and realize it and just move on?
Well, that's happening right now. So the code of conduct, when all of the accusations came out last July, or July 2020, that's when I realized we couldn't handle before there was 75 accusations. So how are we going to do it now? And but people have been trying to deal with all of those accusations of misconduct that came out. So there are people right now, and actually right now, a lot of them are hitting the same wall I hit, where I've decided 5 bans, and I've gotten lashback on all 5 of them, and no one said thank you, and the victims still didn't end up happy. And so they're all like, okay, do we quit our local or city code of conduct? Or the people that run the global ban database, for example, having to make decisions, like I think all of them are at a point where they're like, yeah, I need to move on. And what I've tried to do throughout is whenever they would post about these things, even before they were saying they were tired, I would be like, thank you. Send them a DM, and I thank you so much. You are doing so much right now, and remember to take care of yourself. These problems will always be here. There will always be new problems, and don't lose yourself to that. So just providing ongoing support as someone who knew, I would say that's what I've done the most in terms of seeing these people go through the same thing. I don't know what else I can do. We each are limited in the amount of power we have. Before I quit, I wrote up I took all of our internal materials and I made a big folder of okay, this is the email that we use to tell somebody they've been accused of something. This is the book that I read to make some decisions. These are the articles I cited to decide how many times someone could get away with something before being permabanned, right? Passing on those materials is great.
Sorry,
But
taking a second. Is it still on the Twitter account SSB Conduct Panel?
I believe so.
I remembered you tweeting the folder. So if someone can post a link in chat, it would be very much appreciated. Please go on.
And I can always retweet it as well. But yeah, so trying to get resources out there that could help them, and then just literally, I see you. I see your struggle, and I know. And again, that might go in one ear and out the other. They might not sink in for them, but that's better than nothing.
Teroz?
Yeah, so I think if I saw someone who was in a similar position to where I was about 1 year ago, which would be someone who has too many projects going on, who's pushing too far, pushing themselves too far, the first thing I would say is slow down, and the advice I would give them is to focus on what you truly care about. Think about, why am I in the community? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And instead of doing 20 different things, look at which of these things truly matter to me, and which am I doing because someone expects me to, or which ones do I actually just don't know why I'm doing? Because that would be the case for certain things. If I had just taken a step back, I would have thought, wait, why am I actually doing this? And so I think, yeah, my main takeaways that I would give is just focus on what you truly care about, because the other things are just burning you out. Even though they might give you more followers on Twitter, or they might get you a few thank yous, or you might have a good feeling in your stomach for one day. Those things are just extra, and you don't have time for extra if you're working or studying full time, and you're doing this effectively full time on your time off. Yeah.
Usleon?
I'm thinking, I don't really know. I think I'm just gonna say names because it's like that. As would be, I think after Kobobi took over the Berlin community, and he started having problems, or he started talking like I used to talk about certain things. I think we need to have a couple of talks, and I think it's right now it's going pretty well. I don't know about the rest of the German TOs. I wonder what happened to Team Neutral, so the people behind Awakening. It seemed like they were also got tired and burned out at some point. Um, Maybe just German TOs were a bit more, I don't know, either very private or self-aware. As like I think funny anecdote is everything that happened to me, sort of the same process I went through happened to Luma, which I will consider my TOing mentor. And at some point, sometimes it just jokes and like just kind of like you, just a couple of years later, and sort of that knowledge I pass on to the other people that were hosting stuff here. But I think for me, it was so much at some point that I wanted like a super clean cut. So even if I read stuff on Twitter, I tried to step away from it because I knew if I started getting, even if it was giving advice, people will start coming back at you and asking you or to either like step back in or help, and I really wanted to avoid that. So for me, it was more of like a clean cut and just personally talking to very few people.
Thank you. I have one other thing that we were talking about, and this one is for you, Teroz, because it really ties into what we were saying just earlier about recognition, right? Like there if we don't have this recognition, then what are we doing it for? Like, and it's just very thankless and very depressing. One thing that made it harder, and you were talking about it when we discussed this panel topic last time, was COVID, and especially having to TO online and not TOing in person tournaments. Do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Because I feel like COVID is a huge part of why I actually ended up getting burnt out. I mean, my entire way of going about things, obviously, it was the signs were on the wall, but I think COVID really broke me in a way because we went from having everything. I mean, pretty much everything I did was offline. It was offline events, and you got that the I don't want to say recognition, but you got the positive feeling of I did this, being there
Yeah.
at your event, seeing people enjoying themselves, being able to talk to everyone, seeing all your friends, and just being able to have a good time. It was just this amazing feeling, and that's what really hooked me at the start, and that's what kept me going. And then suddenly the entire thing that I actually enjoyed was taken away, but I didn't change my way of doing things. I kept on hosting events all the same. I kept on seeding all the same. I kept on doing community work all the same, even though the playing field was completely different. And suddenly I was sitting there on a Wednesday night hosting an online event, and when grand finals was over and I could close down my computer, instead of coming home buzzing like, oh, I had such a great day today hosting an event, I just slumped back in my chair and felt, thank God it's over. And it's mind-boggling that that one would do this for an entire year feeling like this, but it was just so kind of printed in my mind that this is what I have to do, this is my responsibility. I need to make sure that the community makes it through this difficult time. This is on my shoulders. And but I think COVID was really difficult, especially for those of us who were used to organizing offline, because online is just, as I said, a completely different playing field.
Yeah, online is all of the effort and none of the being with your friends and having a good time. Yeah. And this ties in more generally to mental health in general. Like burnout, of course, is a huge part of why we have to take care of ourselves in the community and learn to put ourselves first sometimes. But mental health, more generally, is absolutely essential. And being able to take care of ourselves and to notice when patterns are just not being the right ones is absolutely essential. And it's maybe something that we don't talk a lot about in Smash. Like we talk about, oh, self-care, or yeah, you should stop playing for 3 days. You'll see, it's gonna be better. Every time someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I'm not gonna play well. I haven't played in 2 days. I freak out. But it happens way too often. And it's just like we don't talk about this at all. Do you think, maybe Dr. Piggy, do you think that there are some structures, some things that we could build as a community so that we could talk more openly about mental health and do more prevention and less, oh my God, I have to quit now?
Yeah, of course. So I actually think a lot of that is already started, in part because younger generations have a way different attitude than like I'm a millennial, but like boomers or there's a lot of attitudes I was raised with that you just suck it up and you keep working really hard, um, that aren't being tolerated, right? Like like the way that a lot of minimum wage workers aren't going back, post COVID or quote post COVID. A lot of people aren't willing to put up with suffering, for beans, for nothing. And although that might not exactly apply to us because we're usually doing these things out of passion, um, I think that the fact that younger people have words for burnout or bones or no bones or day or spoons, like those are things that just didn't exist when I was growing up. And so there's going to be some shift naturally, because of this like generational thing that's happening, right? But other things that could help is if we had, is having visible examples. So I did tune into the LGBT panel earlier, and there was some discussion about how just having visible LGBT people really made some people feel more comfortable, or seen or understood. And I think in the same way, the more people that talk about their mental health or burnout, whether it's top players or local, figureheads, that's gonna help. And then lastly, I think theoretically, if Smash were to become a little less grassroots and a little more organized, there could be institutional policies that allow you to access mental health resources. But that's a far that's not something that's going to happen anytime soon. So normalizing it, with figureheads and examples. Some of it's already happening because of a generational shift, and maybe eventually we can get some kind of structural support.
Okay. And in terms of structural support, the title of a panel is Burnout and Volunteer Worlds. Now, this is a question I want to submit to you, starting with Usleon. Do you think if we had been paid for what we were doing, do you think if it could have been a job or at least something where we got compensated and didn't have to put ourselves in physical difficulty, but financial difficulty, having to take risks, or even just like being able to take a week off and think I'm not getting paid, but I'm taking an actual week off and I'm allowed to because this is a job? Do you think that would have changed your outlook completely, a little bit, Niall?
Definitely, it would have been very, very, very different. Because I think I'm gonna sound like a boomer, like an old man, but like I think as you grow older, I think the one thing that I got to realize is one of the most precious things we have is time and how you spend that time. So I mean, it sounds kind of bad. Like worst case, if Teroz after his super exhausting online tournaments, if he at least was getting like a nice compensation out of it, it's stressful,
Yeah.
but it's something. If you go home empty-handed, not even a thank you,
Or
it's like
time off.
that, or time off. That's when the question comes. So okay, why do I do all of this, and uh, is it worth it? So it would have been a factor. It wouldn't be. I guess it would have not been that black or white for me. I could have stayed around for a bit longer. You could have done it like a side hustle because you still like it. So you're doing something that you like and you get something out of it. So it's a nice distraction in that sense. You get some compensation. You can decide to go away for some time, and I think it will change things. But I guess it's still a way. There's still some work to be done. There's still some thoughts and mentality work to do for all of the community in, I guess, all areas in that sense.
Mm.
That volunteer work is still volunteer work.
Teroz, you built the Seeding Paradise series where you were actually compensating everyone who took part in the tournament series. So I know it was online. It sucked to organize, but also it was a good idea. Do you feel like this did make a difference, having this little bit of money at the end?
I mean, yeah. In a way, I think it was one of the more fulfilling things that I did during all of COVID. It felt, I mean, just for myself, it felt good to actually be able to pay the people I was working with something, even though, you know, it wasn't, it didn't change anyone's life. It didn't it didn't make anyone able to, you know, restructure their budget or anything. But it was nice to at least feel like we were getting something out of it, and it was really nice to see that it was well, it was nice to prove rather that this can be done. Because I think when a lot of people heard the idea of hosting an online weekly just like every other weekly, but it was paid entry, so I think a lot of people felt like, no way, you can't do that. Who's gonna enter that? But a lot of people actually care. You know, a lot of people felt like, I want to support this. I want to make sure that the people working get compensated something. So I think for myself, it's really, even though this was just before my burnout and it in part affected me, it was really, I'm really happy to have done it, and it felt, as I said, it felt more important than anything else I did during COVID. And just to touch on the overall topic really quickly, um, I think, you know, being compensated, or rather, when we're talking a full-time job, if we were able to do this as a full-time job, I'd like to look at it from the perspective of, you know, right now, most people, they have their full-time job or full-time studies, and then they do Smash. Because that's what it was like for me, you know. I go to work, I'm there all day, and then I come home, and then I keep working, but I work for free. If I was able to just cut out my usual working hours, I might spend the exact same time and effort on Smash, but I would have free time. And that would be a huge game changer in being able to take care of your mental health and all of your other basic human needs.
Yeah, entirely agree. I think one thing as an extra for me, and that might just be me being French, but I feel like, at least in the French social security system, if I went to a doctor and told them this is how I'm feeling these days, they'd be like, yeah, I'm going to make you a letter and you're not going to go to work for 2 months. But they're never going to make me a letter to say, hey, don't spend weekends with your friends for 2 months, you know? So that's also a big part of it, I think. Like, just having it be more official would also mean that when you need to take a break, you would actually be able to take a break and not be like, oh, but they're my friends, or oh, but it's my passion. Yeah, it's your passion, but also you're burnt out, so you need to stop. Yeah. Piggy, do you think that a world that, if it were in any way achievable, which doubtful, but let's not get into that right now. If it were achievable, do you think that we could have better results living in a world where TOs, even, well, also players, right? Like, everyone who got involved and who spent a lot of hours on Melee would have some compensation that would help them. Do you think that would actually get rid of burnout? Do you think that would have helped with the code of conduct panel, etc.?
Great question. So I think that if there were incentives, there are many problems that would be solved. So for example, someone flaking out mid-case is less likely to happen when they know they're getting $50 or whatever for putting in the 5 hours of work they would need to review the materials, right? And again, like you mentioned, salaried employees would have the structure that comes with being a part of an organization. So if the code of conduct were a company, right, that we'd have to have lawyers look at contracts, we sign with employees, and we have to make sure that we're registered with taxes. Like there's so much like official procedural stuff that just lends um, um, it makes it legit, right? And not and it's a two-way street. So not only is it like the organization's legit, but like people working for the organization feel like they have to, they are participating in and being a part of that, right? Because I think a lot of the problems we have with people that volunteer and then fall through is like, well, they aren't really accountable, right? They just said they would do a thing, and that's always going to be lower priority than say like having to take another shift at work to cover somebody or whatever else. Like real life gets in the way of volunteering quite frequently. And so incentivizing volunteering suddenly makes it, well, I guess that isn't really
Not
volunteering.
volunteering.
Yeah, yeah, but it is more sustainable long term. And gosh, yeah, I would have been more willing to justify it to myself, like, okay, I'm going to take a break so I can keep doing this for a long time. Versus when I was like, go, 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 nobody else is going to do it. I wasn't thinking long term. I was thinking like, this isn't going to happen unless somebody does it right now. Yeah, so I think money could make a huge difference, but that's not something we really have. And so it's going to be a complicated balance and dance of turnover rates for TOs or other community organizers, and how we can like reduce that learning curve, reduce the stress, while still growing our scene.
Good. Yeah. And assuming, because we can assume that the Smash economy is not going to change wildly in the coming months or years, assuming that we have to stay volunteers or at least have non-full-time salaries working. So Kyle, Dr. Piggy, you just said if they got $50 for a case, which is not a living salary, but do you think that this kind of pocket money would already be enough to make a change? So whether it's Seeding Paradise, whether it's given $50 or something for 5 or 10 hours of work, but just something that's not zero, do you think it would be enough to make a change, or does it actually have to be completely professionalizing the scene if we wanted to avoid, first of all, burnout, and second of all, not being able to rely on other people? Usleon?
Yeah. So there's
sorry.
some evidence in psychology that different motivations, so like an internal motivation like I want to protect people who have been victimized, versus an external motivation like money, does change the way people think about things, and it's good in some ways and bad in other ways. So for example, if you have a kid that reads all the time just because it's fun, and then you start offering them $10 for every book they read, actually over time they read less. But that's for something that's inherently rewarding, right? A lot of the work we're doing as volunteers is demanding, draining, whether it's emotionally draining because you're dealing with complex moral issues, or physically draining because you're carrying CRTs by yourself, like 20 into your room. Like, you know, I think the money actually justifies the expenditure of our energy and time, in a way that doesn't necessarily erase our internal motivations. So I think even little things like that would make a big difference.
Usleon, I think you had something to say earlier as well.
No, I was just nodding. I think that, I mean, I don't have a lot more to add to that. That's like incentives to, I mean, they do change the mentality, or they might get someone to actually volunteer and try it out because they're getting a little bit out of it. So even if it's just, you know, sparkling that little flame, or starting the journey, even that's enough.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
So I have two answers to this. You know, if just getting that little bit of financial benefit, I think both yes and no. I think for people such as myself, people who are already, you know, fully like invested every fiber of their being into the community, I don't think getting a little bit of money out of it would really change anything, because we're still headed for, you know, the pits of burnout, and so, and we were already fully invested. On the other hand, for people who aren't already fully invested, or people who are on the verge of coming into the scene or coming into the organizing part of the scene. I think, as as already mentioned, that could bring huge value, and which in turn would be helpful to those of us who are already fully in it, because it would take workload off of us. It would make us be able to get the help we need, or get the help to, or be able to drop these things I was talking about earlier, the things that I don't really want to do, but I'm doing because I feel like I have to do. And so I think that in that way, it would help both of those groups, as I mentioned, one directly and one indirectly.
Good. Let's move to one final question. Teroz and Usleon, this applies to all of your experience. Dr. Piggy, this applies to your Code of Conduct panel experience. All three, do you see yourself getting involved again without suddenly getting sucked back into this death spiral after 2 weeks? Why? Can anyone give me an answer?
Are you
please?
asking which of us first? I don't know who to.
I just wanted to have a general reaction. I just saw sad faces. So. Charles, do you want to start?
Okay. So I want to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, so when I got burnt out earlier this year, I thought that, okay, I need a month off.
I remember you saying, like, I'm taking a month or two off and then I'll be back. And well, it was in February.
And well, I mean, and then it became 3 months, but I was fully intending to come back in the exact same way that I had been. But then as 1 month turned into 3 months and 3 months turned into indefinitely, I kind of just shifted my focus onto other things or other aspects of my life. And now, I've moved cities, I've started studying, and just for the first time in I don't know how many years, I haven't been fully invested in esports, has really given me a chance to step back and think a lot. And I feel like I value too many other aspects of my life right now to allow myself to go back to that place where I just invest everything into Smash. Then but of course, this workaholic inside of me who might just give the pinky finger and then whoop, get swallowed right back in. But I hope that this experience has helped me to realize what's actually important, and that the advice that I was talking about earlier that I would give to someone in my position that I was in 1 year ago, that I would actually take that advice myself. And that's what I'm trying to do, because I'm fully intending to return. I'm fully intending to host tournaments next year, or tournament maybe, because I can't, as I've mentioned 100 times, I can't
believe Teroz just said he'd do online weeklies again.
Please just shoot me, Daddy. You catch me doing that. No, but so I'm intending to return, but we'll see what happens. But I think I'm in a better place where, or the experience has been valuable enough to where I won't get sucked in.
Yeah. So you think the clean break was the essential part of it, like having a complete stop to do something else, get involved in something else, and then if you come back, it will be from a completely different space?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Usleon?
I think my time has passed. So I think even if I had to go back and help, I will not get sucked in so much. I think I'll be able to. I learned how to define boundaries in that sense. So I had my own. I would not land in the exact same spot where I was, but at the same time, I believe the community is very different from back then, and that my time has just passed. So it's up to the new generation to step into place and keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's also a matter of wanting to come back. Yeah, cool. And Piggy, for you, it's a little bit different because you haven't left the community. You're still there. You're very much still involved. On this one, like, you have made this decision of staying everywhere except for this project specifically. How do you feel about, first of all, the bans in general and people trying to solve it still to this day, and whether you would consider coming back to it or never, or how did you work with staying in the community while stopping this project?
Yeah, so I think like the other two panelists mentioned, I learned a lesson. I learned my lesson, and part of me knows I will never do it that way again. But I still don't think that I could be a figurehead and an internal organizer and an internal director and everything. I can't. I would never be everything again. That being said, I didn't really have a choice to totally leave because my quote real career is research, and all of the research I've done in the last 4 years has been in Smash. So no matter what, I am stuck with all of this data, and I'm gonna publish anywhere from like 5 to 15 papers in Smash. So no matter what, my name's never gonna. I mean, at least for the next few years, my name's not gonna be gone. I'm not gonna. I can't become invisible. So this is the compromise, is that I will never lead another code of conduct initiative. But I am happy to be a support. Or doing events like this where I can share my experience and hopefully prevent someone from suffering the same way. Super into that. I'm not gonna like be on a panel. I'm not gonna, I've just had to learn to put things in the bucket of nope, that's way too close. And you know what? That's okay. I can give that. I think it's hard, especially because during the worst of some of the code of conduct stuff, my whole life was turned upside down. I had people trying to get me fired from work, and hundreds of Twitter notifications saying really awful things that weren't true just because somebody else said they were. Whatever. It was like very difficult, borderline traumatic experience. And so I will never be able to come back and interact with people on Twitter in the same way because I have this natural emotional reaction that is born in fear and very difficult to unlearn. Trust me, I've been trying. So yeah, you just have to get good about boundaries and know what things hurt and what things still hurt you before and what things would still hurt you now. Because I think none of us would say we regret what we put in. We know that it helped or kept the scene up. So it's just making sure we don't hurt ourselves or regret anything moving forward.
Cool. Does any of you have anything to add or to say to finish this panel before we move on?
I have a couple of last words. I think the point around boundaries is very important, and it applies to whichever role you have in the community. It's not just TOing or playing. You could be writing articles, just managing spaces, and like all of them can suffer for it. And I think that setting boundaries and accepting things is not weak. I guess like the new community is it's a lot younger than my generation. I think that's something that when we were playing, you feel bad. I mean, the concept of mindset became important very recently. So I think it's about time to learn that we have feelings too. So like it's okay to listen to them if you're not feeling well. That doesn't make you a worse player, a worse community member, a worse leader, or a worse TO. So listen to that.
Thank you. Excellent words. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Piggy, Kalnola, Teroz, Usleon, thank you so much for being part of this panel on Burnout. I hope it was useful to our viewers. The VODs will be available eventually on the Eyes Open Conference YouTube channel, hopefully soon-ish. In about 10 minutes, so we'll be having a break now, and in about 10 minutes, we will start our last panel of the day, which will be on how to be a good ally. It's really a panel for everyone, so I really hope you will all join us back in 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.